Hi.
Vanessa from the Straits Times. You last visited the U.S. in 2019, 2.5 years ago, and so much has changed since then. The pandemic, it's now a new administration, and I was just wondering, having spoken to many leaders this week, what's your impression of the direction the U.S. is heading, and of Singapore's ties with the U.S.? Can we count on America?
Well, it's 2.5 years since my last visit, which was pre-COVID and pre-Ukraine. I think on COVID, the battle is not over, but as you can see, the Americans are coming back to living with it, and activities are resuming. And I think that's happening in Singapore also. So it's something still to be dealt with, but it's no longer the only thing which is occupying their minds. On Ukraine, the battle continues in Ukraine. The Americans are deeply engaged in the diplomacy and in other aspects of this fight. It's very much on their minds. It came up in all the meetings which I had, talking to the administration, to the bankers, as well as to the groups of other friends whom I met last night at dinner. They can see how things are going, but at the same time they're thinking ahead as to what could possibly be the range of outcomes and how do we manage that. And in particular, how to manage it in relation to China and the US-China relationship. The US-China relationship, I think, is fraught. Everybody can see that. The issues are difficult. The communication channels, I think they exist, but I'm not sure whether they're up to the very demanding subjects which need to be discussed. And in terms of policy, I think there's a certain continuity in basic attitudes in the US administration, on the House, in Congress, as well as in the population, because the mutual trust and confidence is lacking, and that's a very difficult problem to overcome. But it's something which they are very seized with, and I gave them my views, and I was very interested to hear their perspectives, and I hope that it will be possible to make things gradually turn in the right direction.
PM, this is Junsen from Today.
Yeah.
The issue of Ukraine has been a recurring theme, as you just said. And you spoke of how specific countries are mulling various deterrence, defense options, including nuclear.
Yeah.
PM, what is your sense on how the Ukraine situation is playing out? And what does it mean for Singapore, and how we are responding to make sure that this can never happen to us?
Well, I think the situation has developed over now 6 weeks, and has turned out to be a much tougher fight than people anticipated at the beginning. It's not over. The two sides, the Ukrainians are talking to the Russians, but I don't think that they are close to working out some arrangement yet. And I believe that the military struggle will continue. From our point of view, right from the beginning, we saw this as a matter of fundamental principle of upholding the UN Charter, and in particular not violating the sovereignty and territorial integrity and independence of states, members of the United Nations. And that's a fundamental principle which is vital to us, because if that's up for grabs, then what is our basis for saying we are entitled to exist and to security and to be safe in the world? Therefore, we took a strong stand. We supported the resolutions at the UN. We imposed targeted sanctions on Russia to inhibit their ability to do harm to Ukraine, supply of export controls, as well as on some financial institutions and transactions. I think that was necessary, and that has been done. What it means for us, of course, is as a small country, you have to look to your defenses. Armed forces, build up the capabilities, well equipped, most of all with that will. This is my home, I'm going to fight for it. If necessary, I'm willing to die for it. And it is that will to defend what is yours and to defend your family and your friends that keeps the Ukrainians going, and that Singaporeans must have if you're going to keep ourselves safe in this world. At the same time, we have to look at what's happening in the region and how other countries are reacting to this. And I've talked a little bit about this in the various forums which I have had. And to look beyond the immediate conflict to ask, how can we help events and institutions develop in the Asia Pacific so that we head off a hot conflict like this, rather than reach the point where deterrence has failed and you actually must activate forces and have war and lives are lost. And there are things you can do about that, and I've talked about some of them. APEC, the East Asia Summit, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, which Americans are talking about. Basically, ways to bring countries in the region together to expand their areas of cooperation and interdependence, and at the same time to provide a forum to talk about quite difficult issues so that we can head them off before they become impossible to manage. We're doing our part to encourage that, but that's something which requires many participants, and to the extent that we have influence, we try to encourage other countries to go in that direction, which is one of the reasons why I'm here in the US. Okay, 永红，当然可以。
您上次访问美国的时候已经是2年了，当时候疫情
2年半了。
2年半了，当时候疫情还没有爆发。那么这一次过了2年半以后，你再到这里来，你对美国的现状有什么观察？然后还有也想问一下，在这么多的对谈以后，你怎么评估现在的新加坡和美国的关系？然后乌克兰战争接下来会对我们有什么影响？
这个总共是3个问题吧，至少。
其实是把问题用好，再说一次。
我上一次来是2019年9月，那是冠病疫情之前，乌克兰战争爆发之前。疫情已经延续2年多了，虽然还没有达到新常态，但是你看，你观察，华盛顿或者这边纽约城市里的人，他们的活动，他们的习惯，我看他们已经接受冠病是他们生活的一部分，不让冠病阻止他们进行他们日常生活的活动。同时，当然要保持警惕，自己检测自己，那需要的话自己自我隔离。我看美国人能够这么做，我们也能够这么做。当然，我们很侥幸，这2年来，我们因为冠病我们病例不会太多，并且因为冠病而去世的病患人数也比其他国家来得少。但是现在我们走进一个放宽约束的阶段了，希望大家继续自我保重，继续负自己的社会责任，照顾自己，检测自己，照顾别人，维持大家的安全。美国走过这场风暴，现在他们在非常关注乌克兰的问题，战争还在继续中，我们已经采取了很明确的立场，因为对我们来说，这个是一个很关键的、关乎国家存亡的基本原则，那就是一个国家的主权、的领土完整、的独立，不可以让其他国家没有理由的被侵犯，更不能够由其他国家因为历史错误或者是疯狂的决定，或者是不合理的旧的决定被质问、被挑战。如果我们接受这样的一个这样的一个实际的国际规则的话，我看对新加坡，并且对其他世界上许多国家都会造成一个新的危险。这个不是选边站，这个是维持国家的利益，捍卫一个基本的国际原则， 新加坡一向是秉持这个原则，所以在联合国多年来，每几年都有这样的情况会发生，不同的国家会发生战争或者某个国家侵犯另外一个国家领土的事件。那我们每一次都维持一贯的政策。以前柬埔寨被入侵的时候，就是7、8年，我们的立场也很坚定。过去很久以前，1983年，美国进军 Grenada， 是一个拉丁美洲、中美洲加利比海的一个小岛国，因为他们要改换那个国家的政府，我们也投票否决它，或否认投票反对它，并我们不是美国的仇人或敌人，但是我们不能够接受美国可以这么做，所以这一次我们也不是俄罗斯的仇人或者敌国，但是我们不能够接受任何国家可以这么做，侵犯另外一个国家，并且因为这一次是这么一个重要的一个事件，所以我们不只是在联合国投票表态，不只是发表明确的声明，同时采取了一系列的针对性的制裁行动，希望阻止俄罗斯伤害乌克兰。所以我看大家必须很清楚这一点。有时因为战争是一个很激烈的事情，大家看见事态发生，就反应是不只是一个理智的反应，同时一个心理的整个心理的反应。那我们必须冷静思考，了解我们为什么需要这么做。我想这个不可能是最后一次这样的事情会发生，并且在亚太地区，我们已经有50年和平的经历了。这50年来，我们能够稳健的继续的发展，让我们的国家逐步的发展，和其他国家共存合作，和平竞争，但是共同创造更繁荣的亚太地区。以后50年不能够维持这样的一个状况，这个非常难说。我们不能够认为这个是自然而然会发生的。最重要的问题只不过是我竞争比你强烈一点，或者你竞争比我手段高一点。问题是我们能够不能够和平共处？有没有一个整个区域甚至是国际的框架，让每一个国家能够在这个框架里生存、发展、竞争，共同存在。那我们说是区域问题，但是其中一个很重要的因素就是美国跟中国的关系。美国跟中国关系有一段时间已经产生相当严重的问题了，不只是这个拜登政府上任以来的事情，而是好几任不同的美国总统以来渐渐逐步加深的问题。那我看乌克兰的战争肯定会影响中美关系，那我相信中美两方都不希望他们的关系会恶化，会因为乌克兰而恶化，所以我希望双方都能够保持沟通联系，坦白、坦率、坦诚的讨论他们之间的一些分歧或矛盾，逐步扭转他们关系的走向，那让两国能够维持长期稳定的双边联系，让整个世界，尤其是我们这个世界这个角落，也能够从中受益，能够照顾我们自己的民生和我们的自己的未来。
What would you say to Singaporeans who are concerned that we are choosing sides? Would you say that we are choosing principles instead?
No, we have chosen principles, and we uphold principles which correspond to our long-term national interests, and we uphold them consistently. And one of the fundamental principles which we have always upheld has been the territorial integrity, independence, and sovereignty of nations, and freedom from being attacked by other countries, which is enshrined in the UN Charter. And that is what is at stake in this issue in Ukraine. And that is what is at stake every now and again when such an incident arises between different countries. And it goes to the UN, or even if it doesn't go to the UN, when the issue arises, we take a clear stand. We've done that consistently over very many years. As I said, when Cambodia was attacked in 1978, we took the same stand. When many years ago, in 1983, when the United States invaded Grenada, most of you will not remember, but if you look it up, there was an incident. They went in, they sent troops in, they changed the government there. We voted against them at the UN. Doesn't mean we are the enemy of the US, but we cannot approve of what they did. We cannot endorse or condone such violation of the sovereignty of another country. And that is a reason why we have stood up on the case of Ukraine, and I have explained to the people I met and the audiences I spoke to in America that that is a basis on which Singapore has stood up on Ukraine. You have to take a stand. You have to have the courage to do this, because if you don't do this and don't stand up, where will you stand if one day you need help and you say, please come, a fundamental principle is at stake, and we have to protect that principle. Usually, when you're talking about sanctions, the hurdle is higher. It's a big step for a small country to take. And we would look to the UN. If the UN makes a decision, there's a resolution at the Security Council, sanctions are universally applied, a universal obligation of all the UN members, we will do our part, we will follow. For us to impose sanctions on our own, I think the hurdle is higher. But in this case, because it's such an egregious, flagrant, and major violation of the international norms, and with such a major consequence for the global order, including in our region, we decided we had to act on sanctions because the UN could not act. And the UN obviously cannot act because you need the Security Council. The Russians are there, they have a veto. It's not going to pass. But we had to stand up and be counted, and we did. And so it's a matter of principle. Other people have other reasons and other narratives why they take the stands they do and are supporting Ukraine. But this is a reason why we have taken the stand we have and why we have taken the actions which we have done.